Picture standing on the main street of a once bustling regional centre. Multi-story brick storefronts, grand Victorian verandas, and paved commercial avenues stretch out beneath a heavy, blazing sun. Everything looks ready for business except for one detail. There is nobody there, not a single soul. No footsteps on the pavement, no chatter spilling from the cafes, no engines humming in the distance. Just absolute, heavy silence. When you contrast historical archival photographs of packed sidewalks, crowded pubs, and bustling market days with modern drone footage sweeping over these empty footprints, a chilling question takes root. How does an entire community housing thousands of residents, active schools, and thriving businesses simply empty out, fading like a digital ghost from daily memory? This is not the plot of a post-apocalyptic thriller. It is the real, physical geography of rural Australia. They built these towns to conquer the frontier, but they forgot to check who held the mortgage when the boom ran dry. Today, we are taking a cinematic documentary expedition into the forgotten geographic ledger of rural Australia to uncover why these once thriving hubs emptied out and what happens when the land takes its silence back. To understand how thriving regional hubs become hollow shells, we have to look past the romance of the Outback and examine the structural machinery that gave birth to them. Rural Australia was never colonized by accident. It was built on temporary industrial and agricultural promises, systemic arrangements driven by colonial land allocation, single-purpose infrastructure, and volatile regional labor demands. Governments and corporate syndicates laid down rail tracks, pitched canvas tents, and eventually poured concrete under a single and flexible assumption that the resource beneath the dirt or the yield off the paddock would last forever. Towns were engineered as extraction engines designed with a built-in shelf life. When the national economy shifted, when transport corridors were rerouted, or when global commodity markets pivoted away from regional inputs, the institutional oxygen was cut off overnight. What baked a permanent expiration date into towns that everyone assumed were foundational pillars of the nation? The answer lies in the harsh ledger of economic geography. When the state of the market decides a region no longer pencils out on the spreadsheet, the community built around it becomes expendable collateral. To see how this systemic displacement plays out, we don't have to look into the far desert. We can start high in the mountains, where an entire living town was erased from the dry land and submerged beneath the dark waters of progress. Adaminaby. Our first stop takes us high into the bracing, mist-laden air of New South Wales, to the original site of Adaminaby. Adaminaby stands as a powerful testament to physical displacement and transformation. In the mid-20th century, this was a prosperous, established community with decades of local history, deep family roots, and permanent infrastructure. Then came the Snowy Mountains scheme, one of the most ambitious engineering megaprojects in human history. The government needed water security and hydroelectric power, and Adaminaby happened to sit right in the path of the plan. Instead of routing around the town, authorities made a cold administrative calculation. The original township was systematically dismantled, and the community was relocated a few kilometers away to a brand new site. But what wasn't moved, what couldn't be moved, was left behind. Today, the original town of Adaminaby sleeps entirely submerged beneath the dark, cold depths of Lake Yucumbene. It leaves behind a deeply unsettling psychological impact. The reality of relocating a living town like a chess piece on a board, and on the rare occasions when severe droughts cause water levels to drop, the ghostly, bleached remnants of old brick foundations, stone chimneys, and forgotten roadways claw their way back to the surface. It forces us to confront how national infrastructure development treats rural settlements as disposable collateral. When a government decides a valley must become a reservoir, the soul of a community is forcibly drowned out by the sound of rising water. Yet water is not the only capable of killing a thriving hub. Sometimes a town is murdered not by flooding but by isolation. Yerranderie, deep in the rugged mountain country of New South Wales, lies Yerranderie. At its height, Yerranderie was a pristine silver mining boomtown, glittering with wealth, boasting a population of thousands, multiple bustling banks, and high street commerce that rivaled major regional centres. Today, it is a pristine, frozen time capsule of isolation. Why did a town fueled by high-grade silver collapse so completely? Because of railway politics and water catchment walls. When regional rail lines were mapped out, powerful lobbies in difficult terrain conspired to bypass Yerranderie, cutting the town off from the transport arteries it desperately needed to haul ore and supplies economically. Shortly after, the expansion of Sydney's water catchment zones slapped strict environmental restrictions across the surrounding land, legally strangling access and human activity in the region. The cutoff from civilization was swift and brutal. Unlike towns that experience a slow generational bleed, Yerranderie was effectively locked out of existence overnight. Walking through the site today is an eerie cinematic experience. Corrugated iron workshops, old post offices, and miners' cottages stand remarkably intact, with personal artifacts and furniture left behind, as though their owners had simply stepped out for a quick lunch a century ago. It demonstrates how administrative fiat and logistical isolation can murder a thriving economy with the stroke of a bureaucratic pen. Why did it freeze in time rather than fade gradually? Because when you lock the doors and banish the roads, time itself stops moving forward. From the isolated silver fields of the mountains, our journey shifts west out onto the sun-bleached plains where grand industrial ambition left behind cinematic ruins. Silverton. Welcome to Silverton, New South Wales. If you drive far enough west past Broken Hill into the shimmering heat haze of the Outback, you will find a settlement that once ruled the regional economy. During the silver rush of the 80s, Silverton swelled to a population of several thousand people. It was a chaotic, wealthy metropolis, complete with grand brick hotels, bustling stock exchanges, and an air of permanence. When the rich silver lodes shifted, miners discovered massive, even more concentrated deposits just down the road in Broken Hill. In a matter of years, Silverton bled out. His population packed up their wagons, pulled down their tents, and migrated en masse to the new boomtown, leaving Silverton a hollowed-out shell of stone and corrugated iron. Today, the permanent resident count has dropped to a tiny fraction of its historical peak. But Silverton found a strange, ironic second life. Because its grand historical buildings were left standing amidst an apocalyptic sun-bleached desert backdrop, the town reinvented itself as a cinematic ghost town, renting out its own abandonment to Hollywood film crews shooting post-apocalyptic blockbusters. There is a profound irony in standing in front of crumbling stone ruins where elite financiers once drank champagne, knowing that the town's modern economic output is simply the aesthetic of its own demise. How does a community cope when its only remaining purpose is to act as a fictional wasteland for tourists and cameras? Yet, while Silverton became a movie set, other historic settlements faced an even more aggressive fate, being physically swallowed alive by modern mega mining. Old Boulder, Western Australia's Golden Mile, is legendary. At its beating heart lies the historic community of Boulder, or what is left of it. Old Boulder represents the aggressive, unyielding encroachment of modern industrial extraction. During the late 19th century gold rush, Boulder was built with stunning, ornate Victorian architecture, elaborate hotel facades, and dense residential blocks designed to house thousands of prospectors and their families. Today, much of that heritage has been systematically erased. As the massive open-cut gold mining operations, famously known as the super pit, expanded outward, they didn't respect historic preservation lines. The mining company quietly bought out properties street by street, block by block, turning residential neighborhoods into mining assets. Heavy earth movers and blast charges steadily chewed away at the edges of the historic town, consuming old pubs, corner stores, and family homes. Standing on the edge of the viewing platform looking down into the gargantuan abyss of the super pit, you can see the ghosts of old Boulder echoing in the dust. Heritage balconies and ironwork vanished in real time, sacrificed on the altar of modern gold bullion. It raises an uncomfortable, urgent question. At what exact point does a town stop being a home filled with human memories and officially become classified as a subterranean mining asset? When industrial greed expands without limits, history is treated as mere overburden to be scraped away. But when mining companies finish their work and abandon the claims, the desert takes over in ways that even heavy machinery cannot conquer. Lawlers, deep in the remote gold fields of Western Australia, sits our final destination, Lawlers. Lawlers is the quintessential ghost town. At the turn of the 20th century, this was a roaring, chaotic settlement supporting multiple busy hotels, bustling trading stores, and thousands of hopeful prospectors chasing the elusive glint of gold. Today, Lawlers is an absolute blank spot on the map. There are no gleaming heritage facades here, no cinematic movie sets, and no booming tourist trade. The combination of chronic water shortages and an unforgiving climate, rapidly depleted gold seams, and the devastating labor drain of World War I emptied the region completely within a single generation. When the people left, the desert did what it does best. It reclaimed what was borrowed. Walking across the side of Lawlers today, you encounter the absolute triumph of the arid landscape over human ambition. Concrete foundations have cracked under the shifting heat, timber structures have rotted away into grey dust, and only rusted iron bed frames and weathered headstones in the local cemetery remain. The cemetery outlives the entire town surrounding it. Reading the weathered inscriptions and iron fence posts and faded gravestones reveals the intimate, human reality of people who were born, lived, loved, and died in this desolate expanse, now forgotten by everyone except the wind and the saltbush. The sheer speed at which the Outback reclaims concrete, timber, and iron when human maintenance stops is breathtaking. It forces us to ask what remaining traces truly prove that thousands of people once lived, laughed, and built their entire lives in this silent expanse. The answer, written in the red dust, is very little indeed. We return then to the quiet streets of the Outback ledger. Whether it is a town submerged beneath a dark lake like Adaminaby, frozen in bureaucratic isolation like Yerranderie, reduced to a movie set like Silverton, devoured by a super pit like Old Boulder, or reclaimed entirely by saltbush like Lawlers, the underlying truth remains identical. These empty hubs are not historical flukes. They are the inevitable entries in an economic ledger where past industrial borrowing has finally come due. The archival photographs of packed sidewalks and thriving commerce tell the story of an era that assumed the frontier could be conquered permanently. But the Australian interior plays by its own rules. Are these empty towns merely a quirky anomaly of colonial history? Or are they a sobering preview of how modern, centralized regions age out when their underlying economic justifications expire? The Outback does not negotiate with human ambition. It simply waits. And when the human noise fades away, the land reclaims its silence, leaving behind only the quiet dignity of a landscape that was never truly ours to keep.